There's a specific kind of silence that can split you down the center, sharp, unflinching, the kind you can't cover with noise or laughter or even anger. That's the silence I sat in as I stared at my phone screen, motionless, just 10 minutes after sunrise on what should have been the proudest morning of my life. I had imagined this moment so many times before, me, standing tall in that deep green doctoral gown, gold cords draped over my shoulders, 1,000 faces watching, applauding, cheering. I had always seen my mother's proud tears, my father's subtle smile, my sister finally clapping for me for once. But instead, all I saw on that screen were two messages that made the whole world tilt. Watching you pretend to be a doctor sounds painful. We'd rather be somewhere worth celebrating. The first was from my cousin Beth. The second was from my Aunt Karen. I sat there in that high-rise Airbnb $6, $200 for the weekend, overlooking the San Francisco Bay, custom-catered breakfast still warm on the dining table, feeling like someone had knocked the wind out of me without ever laying a finger on my body. I had flown them all here, 12 people, every last one of them family. First-class tickets, car service, front row VIP seating at the ceremony. I had arranged every detail, even the welcome baskets with handwritten notes. I used up what was left of my savings and maxed out my credit card because I thought maybe, just maybe, this moment would change things. That after 28 years of being the ghost in every family photo, the silent achiever, the uncelebrated backbone, they'd finally see me. But they didn't. Not then. Not ever. My name is Dr. Stephanie Allen, and on the day I earned my medical degree, the only sound in the apartment was the distant hum of traffic and the slow drip of coffee from a French press I had brewed just for them, just in case they wanted a warm drink before the ceremony. I sat there, staring at that phone, realizing that every seat I reserved, every gesture I extended, every carefully folded napkin and chilled bottle of sparkling water had been a part of some elaborate, one-sided performance. And the audience hadn't even shown up. It wasn't always this way. Or maybe it was, and I just didn't know it yet. Growing up in suburban Oregon, in the kind of home with lavender bushes lining the fence and lemon bars cooling on the windowsill, you might think I had one of those childhoods people dream about. But inside that house, love was metered out like rations during a famine, if you weren't Claire, that is. My younger sister. The golden one. The prodigy. The reason every hallway in our home turned into a display gallery of her science fair trophies and piano recital photos. I wasn't jealous back then. Not really. I think, at the time, I still believed that love was something you could earn. That maybe if I worked hard enough, practiced enough, smiled enough, they'd eventually see me too. But the truth is, in my family, merit never mattered as much as magic. Claire had a sparkle to her, and I was just the one who turned off the lights when the party ended. By the time I was 12, it was clear. Claire got the big room with the bay window. I got the spare room next to the laundry, where the walls shook every time the dryer kicked in. When I was 15 and made the honor roll 3 semesters in a row, my dad said, "That's nice," before turning back to the crossword puzzle. When Claire's middle school poetry was published in the local paper, he laminated it and framed it above the fireplace. Still, I didn't give up. I kept climbing. It's funny what survival looks like in a family like mine. It doesn't come in the form of rebellion, or outbursts, or slamming doors. No. In a house like ours, survival looks like quietly becoming undeniable. I studied until my eyes burned. Volunteered every summer at the local clinic. Slept 5 hours a night and memorized the bones of the human body like they were sacred scripture. When I got accepted to Stanford School of Medicine, I didn't even tell my parents right away. Not because I didn't want to, but because I wanted to savor it, just for a moment. I wanted that feeling to belong to me, untarnished by comparison or complaint. Of course, once I did tell them, my mom blinked and said, "That's nice, but Claire is thinking of applying to grad school in London." They never asked what specialty I was considering. Never asked where I'd be living or if I'd need help moving. But they still smiled wide when I paid off their car loan 6 months later. So why, you might ask, would I spend $13,000 on them for my graduation? Because I wanted to believe that some milestones are so big, so bright, so undeniable, that even people who've looked past you your whole life would have to stop and stare. But they didn't. Instead, my cousin Beth sent that message. And my Aunt Karen confirmed it wasn't just a mistake. We'd rather be somewhere worth celebrating. When I finally called my mom, hoping, praying, that maybe she'd be the one to stop the bleeding, she answered after the third ring, distracted. "Oh, Steph. Yeah, something came up. Claire's doing a panel at a tech summit, so we thought it'd be better to show support for that. You understand, don't you?" No apology. Not even a pause. I stood in that luxury apartment, surrounded by empty chairs, untouched croissants, and gift bags labeled with their names, and I realized something I hadn't let myself accept until that very moment. It didn't matter what I achieved. It didn't matter how high I climbed. I was never going to be enough for them. Not because I wasn't exceptional, but because they had already decided I wasn't the one worth celebrating. By the time the ceremony began, I was sitting alone. The seat next to me stayed empty the entire time. And when the speaker announced my name, Dr. Stephanie Allen, magna cum laude, I walked that stage alone. There was polite applause. A stranger in the second row even smiled and clapped with surprising warmth. But the only sound I really heard was silence. Not theirs. Mine. The silence of a daughter finally realizing that the door she's been knocking on her entire life was never locked. It just wasn't hers. And maybe it was never going to open. I never imagined that silence could echo louder than applause, but when they called my name, Dr. Stephanie Allen, the silence was so complete, so perfect in its indifference, it sounded like a judgment passed down by the gods themselves. As I walked across that stage, my shoes striking the polished floor with a rhythm that should have felt triumphant, my heart thudded with the hollow ache of something that had once been hopeful and was now just done. The auditorium was filled with thunderous cheers, proud tears, clapping hands and camera flashes, just not for me. My classmates had their parents waving signs, screaming their names, holding flowers as if their child had just crossed the finish line at the Olympics. Some had siblings clutching graduation teddy bears, crying like it was the greatest day of their lives. Some had friends, extended family, even colleagues from internships showing up, crowding rows with support and screaming their names like they were royalty. I had no one. Just the front row, the VIP section I'd paid for with a portion of my emergency fund, now sitting like a row of ghosts in designer clothes. 12 seats. Plush velvet cushions. Customized nameplates. Gift bags under each chair filled with gourmet chocolates, handmade keepsakes, thank you letters printed on linen paper, each one carefully addressed to the people I thought would finally show up. They didn't. So when I stepped down from that stage, diploma in hand and mouth trembling with a fake smile, I didn't head to the crowd. I didn't look for cameras. I didn't even glance toward the reception area with its champagne towers and congratulatory music blaring over the loudspeakers. Instead, I walked out into the parking lot, my cap still crooked on my head, my gown dragging slightly behind me, and I sat down on the curb like it was the only place left in the world that belonged to me. That night, while the rest of my class toasted with their families in rented halls and expensive restaurants, I sat alone at the edge of the bay, the lights of the Golden Gate flickering behind me like they too were keeping their distance. I wasn't crying. Not anymore. That emotion had passed the moment my name echoed in that auditorium, and not a single camera flash went off. Instead, I was scrolling. My thumb moved slowly over the screen, my eyes locked on every photo they posted, Allen family cruise, celebrating Claire. My mother, beaming in a flowy sundress, standing on the deck of a private yacht. My father, holding a mimosa, his hand raised in a toast. Claire, in the center of it all, sunglasses perched on her perfect face, her arms draped around Aunt Karen and Beth, as if they were starring in a luxury travel ad for Betrayal. Caption after caption scrolled past, so proud of our girl. Best family ever. Grateful to be where love lives. I took a screenshot of every post. I didn't need evidence. I needed fuel. Because something inside me had shifted, slowly, silently, finally. Whatever part of me that still believed they'd turn around and see me standing there was gone. They weren't coming back. And I wasn't waiting anymore. The next morning, I walked into a boutique frame shop on Valencia Street, still wearing the same outfit from the day before, jeans, an old med school hoodie, and a pair of sneakers stained with city dust. The woman behind the counter glanced up from her desk and offered a polite smile. Looking for something specific? I didn't answer right away. I just reached into the folder, clutched to my chest, and pulled out the one thing I had spent 8 years chasing, the diploma. The paper felt heavier than it looked, thick and crisp, my name embossed in gold at the top, the seal of Stanford glinting beneath the morning light. I laid it on the counter, flat and final. She let out a low whistle. "Doctor, congrats." "Thanks," I replied, my voice low and edged with something new, something that didn't care anymore whether anyone else noticed. I handed her a USB stick. On it were 12 photos, all taken during the ceremony. All of them featuring the same thing, 12 untouched seats, each one marked with the name of a family member who didn't bother to show up. She scrolled through them slowly, one eyebrow raising. "These yours too?" They were supposed to be. By the end of the week, I had 12 professionally framed packages, each one custom ordered. On one side, my framed diploma. On the other, a high-resolution print of those VIP seats sitting empty beneath the spotlight. I made sure each photo was perfectly aligned so you could still read the names on the chairs. Claire, Mom, Dad, Beth, Karen, and all the rest. Each name stared back in crystal clarity. I printed 12 identical notes, hand-signed at the bottom in ink the same shade as dried blood. In case you ever wonder where you weren't. Dr. Stephanie Allen. Then I mailed them. One by one. Certified mail. Delivery confirmed. No way to say it didn't arrive. Then I sat back and waited. Not for their response. For the silence that always came after a wound lands deeper than words. The first call came from Aunt Karen. I didn't answer. Then my cousin Beth tried 3 times. Then she texted, a simple "Are you serious right now?" Yes. Deadly. My mother didn't call. Not at first. She sent an email. Subject line: "This isn't fair, Stephanie." I opened it, not because I cared what she said, but because I wanted to see the excuses stack like fallen dominoes. "You're being dramatic. You know we had plans. Claire's opportunity was once in a lifetime, and we didn't think you'd take it so personally." Not think I'd take it personally. Not think missing my medical school graduation, the moment I became a doctor after 16 years of academic warfare, was a big deal. I replied with one sentence. "That seat had your name on it. You chose not to sit in it." She didn't write back. It took 2 more weeks before my father finally called. I let it go to voicemail. His message was short, clipped, full of forced calm that barely concealed his frustration. "We need to talk. This whole thing, sending pictures and notes like that, is childish. We've always done our best, Steph." I saved the voicemail. Not because I believed it, but because I wanted to remember the exact moment my father tried to rebrand emotional abandonment as parental effort. But the crown jewel? The moment that sealed it all? That came when Claire posted a photo of herself on the cruise deck in a designer gown and captioned it, "When you're winning so hard, people send you pictures of empty chairs." Jealousy looks ugly on anyone. Over 100 likes in an hour. Comment after comment praising her confidence, her style, her glow-up. I didn't respond. I didn't share. I didn't defend myself. Instead, I printed the post. Full color. High resolution. Then I added it to my wall, just underneath the photo of her empty seat. You see, I didn't want revenge. I wanted remembrance. Because what they took from me wasn't just a moment. It was the illusion that I had ever truly belonged to them. That I was ever going to be seen, heard, celebrated. And now? Now I had evidence. Not to convince anyone else. Not to plead for understanding. But so that every time I looked at those photos, I'd never again fall for the lie that if I just worked harder, just achieved more, just stayed humble enough, they would love me better. People ask me now, how did it feel? Mailing those frames? Cutting them off without even a fight? And I tell them the truth. It felt like putting down a bag of bricks I'd been dragging through the desert my whole life. Bricks shaped like approval, hope, someday. Bricks I didn't realize I could let go of until I finally stood alone on that graduation stage and discovered I was still standing. Still breathing. Still whole. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not waiting for apologies. I'm not watching the door. Because the moment they chose not to show up, I stopped asking them to. And that, more than any title, any degree, any framed piece of paper, is the moment I truly became a doctor. Not because I earned the right to heal others, but because I finally knew how to heal myself. You learn a lot about people when they suddenly realize they're no longer at the center of your world. The same people who could go years without asking if you made it home safe start calling like your silence is a personal attack, as if your stillness is louder than every word they've ever ignored. The first voicemail came exactly 3 hours after the final delivery confirmation hit my inbox. My phone buzzed once, then fell silent. I didn't recognize the number immediately, but I recognized the voice the moment it played back through my headset, tight, breaking, frantic in that carefully controlled way my mother always used when trying to sound vulnerable without ever admitting guilt. "Stephanie, it's me. It's Mom." We didn't think it would matter that much. It was just a ceremony. We thought. I don't know what we thought. "Please call me back. Please." The last word came out thinner than the rest. Like her throat had constricted around it. Like maybe, for once, it was real. But even then, I didn't press play again. I didn't save it. I didn't cry. I just deleted the message. Because I already knew what it was, a performance. A last-minute rewrite of a script where I was never meant to have a voice. And I wasn't auditioning anymore. The calls didn't stop. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not even days later when they should have understood that silence was the only answer I was willing to give. Beth left me 4 voicemails, each more performative than the last. Her final message was nearly 10 minutes long, full of sobs and half-mumbled explanations about how the cruise had been booked months earlier and how they had no idea it would clash with my graduation. "I just thought you'd understand," she whined. "You're always the strong one. You always seem so above needing all this." No, Beth. I wasn't above it. I just never thought I'd have to fight this hard to be treated like family. My inbox filled with messages. Subject lines like, "Please read this, we need to talk," and my personal favorite, "You're overreacting." My favorite because it was always their default defense. That I was too sensitive. Too emotional. Too dramatic. A walking overreaction who dared to want the same attention and care they tossed at Claire like confetti. But this time, they weren't just writing to complain. This time, they were writing to beg. Because I had done something they never expected, not in a million years. I erased them. Not from my phone. Not from social media. From every single place that legally, medically, or logistically implied they were entitled to show up in my life. It started 2 weeks before graduation, long before the packages were delivered. Long before I knew they wouldn't come. I'd been sitting in my mentor's office, finishing up the last of my end-of-year paperwork. Dr. Vega had always been the kind of person who saw through excuses and shallow smiles. She never cared how perfect your GPA was if your patients couldn't trust you. She once told me I had the kind of eyes that people only get after surviving something brutal and learning how to hide it. We'd grown close over the years. The kind of close that doesn't require explanations. The kind where I didn't need to tell her my family wouldn't be attending, because she already knew. That afternoon, I'd been scanning through my clinical rotation paperwork, confirming immunizations, documenting travel history, updating insurance files. That's when I saw it. Emergency contact. Name: Linda Allen. Relationship: Mother. I stared at the line for nearly a full minute. My cursor hovered. My hands didn't move. I couldn't explain the feeling that rushed through me, equal parts clarity and fury. Not the kind of fury that explodes, but the kind that chills you from the inside out. That mutates into something sharper. I clicked delete. It took me less than a day to erase them all. From my residency applications. From my insurance policies. From my banking documents. From my medical power of attorney. All of it. Gone. And in their place? Dr. Vega. The one person who stood beside me as I recited the Hippocratic Oath. The one who placed a hand on my shoulder and whispered, "You did this. No one else. Remember that." I filled in her name and her number in every single blank. Sent her a copy of the paperwork with a sticky note that said simply, "Thank you for showing up." She didn't ask questions. She didn't pry. She just nodded when she saw me in the hallway later and said, "I'm honored." I didn't stop there. I rewrote my will. Not because I had anything extravagant to leave behind, but because it felt necessary. Like drawing a line in the sand. Like making it legal. Permanent. Undeniable. Everything I had, savings, car, future insurance benefits, even my notes and manuscripts from med school, was now set to be donated, passed forward, invested in the next girl like me. The invisible one. The overlooked one. The one with fire in her chest and no one in the front row. I signed the documents in a notary's office downtown, the air conditioner humming softly above my head, the pen gliding across the paper like a scalpel through skin. When I was done, I exhaled and left the office without looking back. I was no longer their fallback plan, their safety net, their daughter when it was convenient and their stranger when it wasn't. They didn't know any of this yet, of course. They were still calling, still texting, still pretending I was a phase they could wait out, like a storm that would pass if they just stayed quiet long enough. My father's message came next. His voice was tight, controlled, the same tone he used when he wanted to avoid showing guilt. "Steph, enough is enough. Let's be reasonable. I know we messed up, but this feels excessive. You're better than this." "No, Dad. I'm finally exactly who I needed to be. The girl who stopped waiting." It took them 6 weeks to realize I wasn't coming back. 6 weeks of silence. 6 weeks of missed calls. 6 weeks of being left unread. 6 weeks of staring down the truth. They were no longer entitled to me. I saw the final unraveling in a group text I had muted long ago. The one titled Allen Family Updates, which they kept for photo sharing and birthday reminders. Suddenly, the chat lit up again. "Beth, has anyone talked to Steph?" "Karen, no. She's ghosting us." "Mom, she removed me from her insurance." "I found out when I called the provider." "Dad, she's playing games. Let her burn it all down." "Claire, I think she's serious. She took me off the sibling clause in her med school donation pledge." "Beth, wait, she's donating her life to a school?" "Mom, what happened to her?" "She's not the girl I raised." "Dad, maybe she finally grew up." I read the messages once, then archived the entire chat without replying. Because they were right about one thing. I wasn't the girl they raised. I was the woman they forgot. And she wasn't waiting to be remembered anymore. Dr. Vega invited me to her home the day after I finished my final placement rotation. She didn't say it was to celebrate. She just said she made too much pasta and had a bottle of wine that needed opening. But when I arrived, there was a card waiting for me on the table. It wasn't fancy. Just a folded piece of white stationery, handwritten in blue ink. "Stephanie, I've mentored dozens of students in my career. Brilliant ones. Charismatic ones. Some with perfect GPAs and perfect resumes. But none with your grit. None who survived fire and walked out colder. None who rewrote the ending and made it better than the beginning. I'm proud to know you. And I'm honored to be the person you chose when it mattered." Vega. That was the first time I cried. Not because I missed them, but because I finally understood what it felt like to be seen and not used. Months passed like waves crashing against a cliff I had long since reinforced. With every passing week, I learned how to breathe in the space their absence had carved out, not as emptiness, but as a blueprint for something new. I wasn't grieving anymore. I wasn't waiting at the edge of a phone call or measuring the silence between us like it was a punishment. I had crossed over into something far stronger. I had learned that peace, once it arrives, is never allowed. It's deliberate. It's permanent. It doesn't beg to be recognized, it simply refuses to leave. By the time the invitation came for the white coat ceremony at the hospital, a full-circle moment marking the official start of my residency, I didn't even pause to ask myself the question that used to haunt every milestone. Should I tell them? The answer had already written itself into my skin, my steps, my breath. No, I didn't tell them. Because some chapters don't need commentary from the people who tore out the first pages and never bothered to see how the story ended. The ceremony was held in the grand hall of the hospital's academic wing, beneath glass chandeliers that caught every glimmer of light and bent it across the room like broken stars. Rows of white-covered chairs lined the aisle, each one filled with new residents, fresh, focused, shaking slightly with the weight of what was ahead. The smell of roses from the flower arrangements mixed with that sterile scent only hospitals carry, antiseptic, linen, adrenaline. I stood near the back at first, watching as others embraced their parents, their siblings, their spouses, their childhood best friends flown in from out of state just to clap and cry and beam with pride. Their families wore coordinated outfits. Their voices rang out with laughter. Their cameras were ready. And I stood alone, but this time I chose it. Dr. Vega arrived shortly after, walking with that subtle command she always carried, a quiet authority that silenced every doubt. She walked straight to me, handed me a small white box, and said, "No speeches. Just open it when you're alone." Then she stepped back into the crowd. No questions, no pressure, just presence. When my name was called, Resident Dr. Stephanie Allen, Emergency Medicine, I stepped onto the stage without hesitation. My spine didn't bend. My voice didn't shake. I didn't search the audience for faces that would never be there. Instead, I looked out at the future I had built with my own hands, on my own terms, and I smiled. Not because I was proving anyone wrong, but because I had finally stopped asking anyone else to validate what I already knew. I earned this. Every night I stayed up memorizing symptoms while my classmates slept. Every shift I pulled through holidays. Every family event I missed because I was still chasing a version of myself that felt real. The coat was heavier than I expected. It smelled like starch and purpose. I had the entire event professionally photographed by a woman named Gloria, a former trauma nurse who now worked full-time capturing medical milestone moments. Her camera wasn't just a lens, it was a witness. She didn't just take photos of people. She caught their transformation in midair. When she asked if I had family she should focus on, I smiled politely and said, "No, just get the ones who showed up." The resulting photos didn't need a filter. Me, standing tall in my white coat, stethoscope slung over my neck like a ribbon of hard-earned truth. Around me, colleagues with sweat still in their brows and fire in their eyes. Mentors like Dr. Vega, nodding with a pride too solid for words. My team. My new family. I posted just one photo. One single frame. No carousel, no slideshow. Me, in that coat. Captioned, "Healing others starts with healing yourself." I stopped inviting pain. The reaction came faster than I could have expected. By the time the sun set behind the hospital parking lot, my phone was vibrating nonstop. Not from colleagues. Not from strangers congratulating me. But from them. From the people who forgot me until I reminded them I could exist without their permission. The first DM came from my mother. "Why didn't you tell us? We would have come." Sure you would have. Like you came to the graduation you forgot. Like you clapped for the child you raised only to neglect. Then Beth chimed in, her message drenched in faux innocence. "Saw your post. Are we still not talking?" Claire sent a voice note, as if her voice could still bend the timeline, erase the history, rewrite the absence. You didn't even give us the chance to show up this time. Don't you think that's unfair? Unfair. They always called it unfair when they were finally treated the way they treated me. But I didn't respond. Not to any of them. I was too busy reviewing patient charts. Too busy learning the rhythm of a code blue call. Too busy resetting bones and holding shaking hands and sitting by bedsides at 3 a.m. while machines beeped softly in the background. I was too busy saving lives. And mine had been the first one I rescued. I opened Dr. Vega's gift that night, alone in my apartment, still in my white coat, still high on adrenaline. Inside the box was a necklace. Simple. Silver. A small charm shaped like a spine. There was a note taped beneath the lid. To remind you of what you carry. And how you never broke. I put it on immediately. And I haven't taken it off since. Months later, I got a letter. A physical one. Thick paper. Blue ink. No return address. It was from my father. The handwriting hadn't changed since the notes he used to write to Claire for her science fairs. Stephanie. I don't know what to say that would make any of this right. I see now that we failed you. That we were so busy celebrating what we thought was worth celebrating, we didn't see the person who deserved it the most. I saw your photo. You looked powerful. I'm sorry I missed it. I hope it's not too late. I folded the letter neatly, slid it back into the envelope, and dropped it into a locked drawer in my desk marked history. Because while I didn't hate them, and while some part of me would always carry the scar of what was never given, I had finally accepted that some wounds don't get stitched up with words. Some scars just teach you how to stop bleeding for people who only showed up with bandages after the damage was done. People ask me now, what happened to your family? And I answer with honesty. They taught me how not to love. And I listened. Because you don't get to keep calling it love when it only shows up after the ceremony's over and the chairs are empty. You don't get to call yourself family when your only offering is silence until shame forces your hand. Today, I live in a small apartment overlooking the city skyline, my stethoscope hanging beside my keys like a quiet badge of war. I work 12-hour shifts with people who don't care where I came from, only what I do when it counts. They don't care who clapped at my graduation. They only care if I can keep someone breathing until the surgeon arrives. And I can. Because I'm not here because of them. I'm here in spite of them. And every life I touch is a reminder that healing isn't just physical. It's personal. It's deliberate. It's earned. I still wear that necklace. I still carry that silence. And every time I walk past my framed white coat photo in the hallway, I don't think about who wasn't there. I think about who stood with me. I think about the girl who sat alone on a curb and realized she could rewrite her whole life from scratch. I think about the fire it took to burn down every lie they told me and light a new path instead. Blood might be thicker than water, but respect is thicker than both. They taught her how not to love, and she listened. If your family ever made you feel like you weren't worth showing up for, hit subscribe.